the Cali Sober Mom live and in person.
What an awesome name.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you were telling me you just kind of like, you started looking that up and you're like, no one's got this yet.
Yes. Well, I started with I thought the name Mommy's New Medicine was kind of really clever when I first started all this crazy ideas, and started with that, and then noticed that the term Cali Sober applied a lot more. It was easier to explain, and it was right on the cusp of people know about it, but then they don't know about it either. So it wasn't like bombarded and everywhere. So I was like, this would really be good to come in and define.
So explain Cali Sober for those who aren't familiar with it yet.
Okay. So Cali Sober essentially is harm reduction. So I think some people get really caught up in the sober part, meaning that you have to be all things sober. Like you don't put any type of drug, alcohol, anything in your body. And that's really more for strict sobriety. Whereas Cali Sober is like, no, I woke up to what alcohol is, the poison it is, the medical effects, the stuff they aren't really sharing publicly. And I choose not to put toxins in my body anymore, but I still want to party. I still want to have fun, and I want to learn about plant medicines and how I can use those recreationally, but they're also good for my body. And so it means that you don't partake in toxins or vices that are known to have the effects of, say, like alcohol or methamphetamines, but you're open to marijuana, you're open to mushrooms, you're open to things that could enhance your body as well.
What would you say to the people that look at mushrooms and things and say that they're toxins as well?
I would say, show me all the research. I guess that would be my main thing. Like, I'm open to any discussion. I will tell everybody, like, I am not the expert, and I'm just as willing to listen to your viewpoint and open-mindedly and understand your research if you're just as willing to look at mine. So if we can sit down and have an open discussion and share research and share studies and facts, okay, let's do that. But if that's just something you've heard or you've read one thing and you're closed off after you say that, then I really don't want to have a discussion, because I don't want to just argue with someone that wants to beat their point into you.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the people that I have had that conversation with, they are just literally, they're terrified of them for no reason. Like, there's no good reason. It's just they want to maintain control, and they know that if they take this substance, it's going to make them turn around and look at themselves and go, why am I this way?
That, and the other thing I say is, it's scary once you open your mind, because once you open your mind to realize, even consider that alcohol, which was so accepted and so celebrated and so part of our society, could be awful. It could have been a lie. They could have bamboozled you. And then everything they told you was wrong and kept you away from, and I hate to say the word indoctrinated, but indoctrinated into us. Once you're open to realizing that that might have been a lie too, and you learn one thing, it's hard not to learn everything. And so I think it's almost a defense mechanism of, instead of having to open up, because that's a scary place to be in, I understand that, then they just are their way and they close everything off. And it's a defense, I think.
No, it makes sense, because there's a rabbit hole you go down after that, and you just start learning more and more about the corruption.
That is what I spent my summer in. This was supposed to just be a fun podcast, get the message out to other moms and other women. And someone had told me, well, if you're going to do this, you've got to get on LinkedIn, because that's where everyone in this industry is networking right now. It's the only platform that isn't shutting them down. They can share information. And these are networks that don't have these huge built-in, you think of like the National Realtors Association. You have functions, you have like associations within your city that feed up to the national. These industries don't. And so that's the one area that they're all talking and sharing. And I started getting into the like political part of it and the lobbying part of it. And oh man, I went down a rabbit hole this summer, and that was ugly. That was ugly. But now I'm coming back into the fun again.
Well, like what was the reason you got into the political side? Because I know you were saying something about your husband's place of business. If you can explain that a little bit. Yeah.
So my husband and his family are in the bar and restaurant industry. So they have a few bars here locally. They have one in Pensacola. And when the legislation was happening, it wasn't even so much for their businesses necessarily. I had done an interview probably about 2 weeks prior with Joe from Crescent Canna. Joe, if you're watching this, you still owe me an interview. I forgot to hit record. We did a live podcast recording. I set it up like I did a party that 3 people showed up to. We had such a good night. It was a fun time. But when we got done, I had forgotten to hit record. But we were talking and just some of the things we were delving into, I was like, I knew that I enjoyed the can of beverages. This was March when I interviewed him, but I knew my whole point was getting this information out there so other women knew, right? But then hearing him from the business side, I was like, this is going to be massive. Like, this isn't just a fly by the night one-off item. Like, to me, this has the ability to overtake wine. This has the ability to overtake alcohol culture. And I was talking to him about some of the limits from the legislation and this and that. And this is before the new legislation got hit. And some of the things he said. And afterwards, I was like, there is no way they're going to let them just take off into the sunset like this. Because if that's the truth, then I feel like I just interviewed like one of the next Anheuser-Busches of this world. And that just stuck with me. And literally 3 days later, Louisiana popped off with all the legislative issues coming down. And I'm like, oh, of course that makes sense. It's taking away too much business from the big alcohol companies. And then they were saying it's for the kids. But then when you do all the research about alcohol, which is what I'd spent the last year, because me getting off of alcohol, I was learning everything I possibly could about it. And, I'm learning that kids see more advertisements for alcohol than we do as adults. And if you think about it in marketing terms, like I have an MBA in marketing, you've got to keep that funnel full, right? And if I think it's like 90% of their revenue comes from like 10% of their drinkers. And I did an interview with a doctor that had said, if you drink before the age of 16, you're blah, blah, blah times more likely to have a drinking issue later in life. I'm like, so that's how they've got to keep their funnel full of their lifetime customers. And so when you start doing the research, alcohol is self-regulated for advertising. So they say what they will and won't do, and then they break their own rules of what they won't do. And so kids age 11 to 14 see more alcohol ads than adults do every single day. And then you look at the death rates per se. So last year combined, all drugs combined, 108,000 deaths. None of those listed as marijuana, 0. It's on the DEA's own website that you can't overdose from it. Alcohol alone, just alcohol on its own, 178,000 deaths last year. And so you just look at this, and that's kind of what drove me more and more down it. And then as I was on LinkedIn, talking to all these companies on the national level and screaming what was happening down here, they're like, oh, that's just Louisiana. That won't happen anywhere else. That's just Louisiana. You guys are backwards down there. And sure enough, the whole playbook is rolling out. It happened in Missouri. It's happening in California. It happened in Iowa.
What are they saying?
That it's for the kids, that this is for the kids. And basically they're just trying to limit it or reduce it as much as they can. But meanwhile, these same companies that are paying massive amount of lobbying dollars to slow down the spread of these companies being able to grow and get distribution and make more of a massive impact, they're in the same rooms getting their financials to buy them out. And so being on like weirdly both sides of it, of I got involved in this for a different reason, started networking for different reasons, but then finding all of this out, you just want to like shake everybody and be like, can you not see what is happening here?
I feel that way about a lot of things in this world.
Yes.
Yeah. We started selling this because Joe is a regular here.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's actually been on the podcast as well. Good time talking.
I love me some Joe.
I like messing with Joe. I love it. Every time he's in here, I mess with him. I'll drink Louis just to mess with him.
Oh, yeah. But I do love Louis too. Have you met them?
Eric's been on here as well.
Okay, good. I was like, Eric, I know I met up with his wife, Michelle, because they have twins too. So whole nother story, but yes.
It's so cool that like we all know these people. It's such a small community here in New Orleans. But yeah, they're, as soon as he brought it to me, I tried it, and I used to drink alcohol as well. And as soon as I started drinking their products, I was like, "This is perfect. I'm not hungover the next day. I'm not bloated. I feel amazing. I drink less of this And then I go home on time. Like I'm not out partying all night long.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a couple of these and I leave.
Yep.
It's a game changer. And whenever all the legislation stuff started dropping, I never reach out to any politician. I'm like, this is all stupid shit. But I was like, this is something that I feel passionate about. So I reached out to him and they gave me the same bullshit line too. You know, I'm doing this for the kids, for the families. We have to do what's best for the families. And I'm like, well, then if you need to do what's best for the family, you need to outlaw alcohol, sugar, and just start naming off all these other things that are things people get addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, those are the real problem. These right here are actually getting people off addictive substances. Because I've seen it in this bar right here. There have been people that are borderline alcoholics and they come in here and they would drink every single day and they switched off to this stuff and their lives have improved. I've visually seen this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to try to take this away from people, because that was initially the thing, right? They were trying to ban
it
these.
outright.
Yeah. And then I think they conceded on that and they're going down to 5 milligrams instead of 10 milligrams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like they're cutting it off there, they're capping it there. And what's the issue with them? The grandfather plan. What is this? You'd think I would know these things, right?
Well, your bar has the license, so why would you? Yeah. But also, let's go back when all this was happening. I'd reached out to the main hemp organization in the state and said, "Hey, I really want to help." Nobody responded to me. I wrote a few articles, got one published in Biz New Orleans, did their interview. And when they announced kind of that trickery for bars and restaurants it wasn't even the trickery at the last minute. It was when all this was happening. And I talked to a bar owner that's built an empire for himself. And he said, well, I don't have to worry about that. It's all going to go Schedule 3 soon anyway. And I said, do you really not understand that Schedule 3 has absolutely zero impact for you? It's not guaranteed.
What does that mean?
Oh, marijuana itself. There was a big announcement that they put out that it was going to move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So cannabis itself, which is different than the hemp that we're talking about in the legislation. And so that has no impact. That would impact like the medical marijuana in the state or potentially getting recreational. Whereas these drinks are hemp-derived products. And hemp and cannabis are the same plant. It is the most ridiculous definition you've ever heard of. But nonetheless, these drinks are federally legal. And I told him like he should be very interested in what's happening in the politics right now. I was like, because the only one it hurts is you. I was like, because as consumers start shifting away from alcohol, and if they ban these and they can't go to your bar to buy these, they're going to order them offline and they can still show up on our doorsteps. And so the only people hurting by this law are small businesses, and it went to early childhood education. I was like, so we're taking taxes away from kids and we're hurting our small business owners.
What do you mean it went to early childhood education?
That's where a good chunk of the taxes for these hemp-derived products go to in our state.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. So we're helping the kids, but we're taking away sales of the products that go to early childhood education. And so you can imagine, like, I was worked up and, the first association just ignored me. And then I reached out to another one. I was like, man, have you guys really tried to recruit the Restaurant and Bar Association for Louisiana or New Orleans? Because at the end of the day, this is going to have a massive impact on their bottom line. And they may not understand it today, but as consumer preferences are changing, and I have the research right here, if they get banned from serving it today, they're not going to be able to serve it 5-10 years from now when that's what the majority are buying. Like they're losing their right to have another income stream down the road. And this needs to be told to them. It needs to be presented. And one of the business owners that this would directly impact said, that's a great idea. Why don't you go do that? And I just thought to myself, why would I go do that? Like, I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart and I'm passionate about it. It's not my job to go fight for your business.
Right.
Meanwhile, I'm emailing your organizations asking how I can help. And the organizations itself are ignoring me. Sorry, I went down that rabbit hole. So it wasn't necessarily like my husband's business that kickstarted all this for me. It was like, man, they are trying to cut this out before we as a society realize how beneficial it can be for our health, our options. They want to cut off our choices to limit competition. And that bothered me. This was unfair use of resources by the politicians to do that.
So that's okay. Sorry. We were chatting about that before you walked in, about what the logical reason would be to not allow businesses to get a license. And what are you saying again?
Oh, it's so they don't have options outside of selling alcohol.
Oh, so you're just saying they're trying to cut.
Yes, the whole legislation came from the top beer lobbyist in the state. He's the one that kicked off the entire thing, and it's because they're cutting down sales. And instead of admitting that your product isn't great, admitting everything that's to come, what do? They're trying to stop competition before the competition grows too big for them to purchase. So they use their political powers and their lobbying money to pass through laws before the citizens are aware enough to stand up to the laws. And they got it passed through with people we didn't vote on for this. This was not ever brought up in any of these political campaigns that these folks ran on. They got this done without any voting power by the state. And what really makes you smile is the same time this was happening, they quietly gave the cultivator licenses. So medical marijuana in the state of Louisiana got passed through because the cultivator licenses would be held by the universities, LSU and Southern. They have agricultural departments. And so that's how they got it through. This would be handled by the university. This would be educational. This would be here. They handed over the cultivator licenses at the exact same time. So now 90% of any income that comes through medical marijuana is done by a man named Bollinger, who is a very wealthy shipyard magnate from the state of Louisiana and one of the biggest donators and closest friends of our governor. And when you look at now 90% of how is it medical marijuana if it's ran by someone that has no medical experience? And my own doctor at Ochsner, the largest health organization in the South, cannot write me a prescription, but I can get my medical marijuana card by going on Groupon, getting a free card, and they didn't even turn on their camera to write me a prescription. That's what's happening. So all that's okay, but let's put this law in place before anybody can vote on it, anybody realizes what it is, and get it passed through so our buddies keep making money.
This is all mind-boggling. The entire way our government operates is mind-boggling to me. It's clearly not operating for the people.
No.
And I don't see how people can't see this yet.
I think it's everyone. Here's what I understand. So when I've said this to people and that I know personally, right, that aren't as necessarily invested or want to do a podcast or anything like that. And I'm angry. I'm mad. And they're like, yeah, that's just Louisiana. Everyone, or that's just the government. It's so I think just known to us that there's corruption at some level that we just say, oh yeah, okay. Because at no point have we ever been able to do anything about it. Where would you pinpoint it? Where would you touch it? But I think the reason that I've dived so heavy into this and I'm so passionate is because we're on the cusp of trillions of dollars switching hands and power switching and consumer preferences switching. And this is something that if we wake up to it now and get loud enough, we as people could have a little bit of control about how this switches rather than when you find out about it 60, 70 years down the road, we all just found out about how big tobacco took over processed food when that all was going down. And now as a country, we're all very unhealthy. We have all of these issues. And when you start tracing it back, it's man, alcohol's about to do the same thing. They're about to take over an industry that could have a lot of potential healing, a lot of potential benefits, and try to do a lot of good for the people. And we're really going to let it be bulldozed and handed over to an industry that it's going to come out in the next 10 or 15 years that they knowingly knew their product was poison. They hid reports, they hid research, they lobbied against getting us to know the truth about alcohol. But by the time that all really comes out, then it takes 20 years for the public to accept it and get off alcohol. Think how long with cigarettes. they'll be in the win making their trillions of dollars off these products.
Yeah,
again.
they've already got the money then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hopefully that's not the case with how connected everything is these days. I mean, hopefully people can actually wake up. I think, back in the day, whenever tobacco took over food, people didn't really have the access to information we do today.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, hopefully with that being said, people will wake up. It's just getting people to take action is the problem. It's like what you were talking about with the business owner. A lot of people, they hear something and they're like, oh, well, you go do it, like, good luck. They don't want to, it's not only that they don't want to take action. It's also they fear the consequences of what happens if they step up to the big government.
Yes.
I've seen that a lot with people. Because I a few years ago, I come up with a solution for these problems that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about it after the podcast if you're interested.
Yeah.
But I pitched it to a lot of people and they were kind of saying the same thing. They're like, I don't want to do that. But you go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good luck, kind of a thing.
And it's hard because I am trying to, I'm networking on LinkedIn. So I'm getting to the other owners of brands across the country and these organizations that are lobbying on the national level. And I'm trying to do it locally. And I'm on Instagram and I'm doing a podcast. I'm like, I'm going to take the 12 hours a week I have to myself, because outside of that, I'm a full-time mom of 3 kids under the age of 4. I have 3 kids in 18 months. So that is where the majority of my time is. I'm like, how can I get my voice heard the loudest in 12 hours a week? Mm-hmm. And it's so hard to be heard. Right. You've got to switch your persona to have a hook, and people's attention span has been trained into dopamine hits. And I never knew it would be so hard to be heard. I always thought, man, if someone was doing something that would help the world and they were doing this and they were doing that, it would organically take off, right? It doesn't. Right. It is so hard. And then you have your social media platforms, which restrict everything. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm on Instagram, I have to say gardening. I can't say hemp. I can't say cannabis. Really? Even though they're legal, I will get kicked off the platform for saying that. And so I have to make it cutesy, and I have to use a nickname, and I have to drive people to an email list so I can actually say things unfiltered. And I've said a couple things and they've been like, ooh, I'd be careful saying that person's name in Louisiana. You don't know who's going to show up at your front door.
What?
And I'm like, is that a violent threat? And they're like, well, not for me, but that's how Louisiana works. And I just am like, man, what do you do? It's hard.
It is very hard unless you say some shit like hot tua. That's crazy that those people gain the attention whenever you're actually trying to do something good for the world and you can't really do it. Are you on X or Twitter?
I can't handle it. Okay. So I'm mostly a team of one. I have a VA that helped me with some random stuff, but it's mainly just me. And so the platforms that I went for first were Instagram, because I really want the end goal. The political thing was a side quest, right? Really, the goal for me was just to tell other moms and other women that were like, hey, we are taking on a lot right now. We are going through all this, and they keep shoving mommy wine culture down our throat, and it's making it worse. Mm-hmm. And I promise you, it's still hard on the other side, but it's easier, if that makes sense. And I really just wanted other women to know, you won't be alone if you choose to not drink. There's other avenues to still try. There's other support systems. It sucks at first getting off an addictive substance, but I want women to live their best lives and feel empowered to do so. And so that's why I went for Instagram first, because I knew that's where most of the women that I felt like I was at and I wanted to get that message to, that's where they live. Mm-hmm. And then LinkedIn for the professional. So slowly creeping into YouTube. TikTok, I see as a commodity shop. It's really being pushed towards TikTok shop to compete with Amazon. I don't want to sell anything. So that's not a high priority for me. And then X is just a free for all.
Right.
I opened that thing. I was like, I don't even know what to look at. I do not understand how this is. I understood nothing. And I was like, I'm going to slowly close my browser because I am not ready for this yet.
Yeah, there's a lot on there, but at least you don't get censored. Okay, that's the beauty of that, is you can say whatever you want to, however you want to, and you get to say your piece the way you want to. I'm a fan of Instagram myself, but I do know that if you say the wrong thing, you will get pushed under the rug. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think I like what you're doing. I think you should definitely keep going. And I also like your content that you're making.
Thank you.
That's actually whenever I saw your content and I was like, you have to come on the podcast and chat about this because this is an issue that, is something that I feel passionate about too. And I don't like the way it's being handled at this point in time.
I don't either. I really appreciate that. I think we connected too because when all this was going down, I felt like I was shouting into the empty abyss about what was happening. I'm like, why isn't everybody caring? Mm-hmm. And I had seen you shared some posts too about like contact your legislators, go fight for it. And we're like, yeah, another bar that's doing it. I love the name. That name is perfect. That was totally an accident. So yeah, I knew we connected through there. And then just trying to like share and get that word out there. But again, like I have family members that just ignore what I'm doing rather than ever have a discussion on cannabis. They would rather just ignore it and stay in what they've been told and taught. And
trust me, I get that too. Plant medicines changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms more specifically. But yeah, I was going in like this weird dark hole and I had my first dose of psilocybin.
Okay.
And it just totally gave me an upward trajectory. And I went to tell my family about it and they didn't want to hear any part of it. So I get it. It's the same thing. But I mean, it also comes from the way they've lived their life and the experiences that I've had through life. So I'm from a very small town in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is still taboo there.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I go back home, I'll have conversations with my friends there. Some are police officers, some do other things. And when I tell them that, yes, you can drink THC in cans now, they're like, what are you talking about? Yeah, that's insane. People still get arrested for having a little bit of marijuana on them there. So it's a different mentality in places like that. So it's cool that people, are kind of waking up to these things, but it's also it's a taboo in a lot of our cultures.
Mm-hmm. I would say too, like very similar to you. So I'm from Iowa, actually, originally. It's Des Moines, so it wasn't small town, but obviously not like here, but very different upbringing than down here. But even down here, people have similar. Anyway, all that to be said, when I started drinking these drinks, I quit drinking alcohol in April of 23. Mm-hmm. And then the first time I had the drinks was in July of 23. So they were still very, very new. Martin's, I think, was the only one really carrying them locally. And then by December, January, when I had the idea for this podcast, it was still so new and so unknown. And that's when I really thought like, it's going to take people hearing about this. It's going to take people seeing it, doing it every day. And they're not going to put that in mainstream media. Mainstream media has to look at who their advertisers are and where their money's coming from. And if most of your advertising comes from pharmaceuticals and alcohol and politicians, they're not going to talk about this openly. And I'm like, all right, I live in one of the most conservative parts of town. Steve Scalise goes to the church is right down the street where my kids go to school. They just had their big fair and it was sponsored by an alcohol company. There was alcohol company within the fair. One of the Supreme Court justices graduated from that school. I mean, this is the epicenter of where everyone that wouldn't stand for this, where you would never expect to see a mom talk about it openly, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. I don't have a job to lose. I don't have a random drug test coming my way. My husband supports me, so he's not going to leave me and file a custody battle over this. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to talk openly so they can see this is a real mom that went through the hells of alcohol, the hells of postpartum depression and anxiety and just all these things, and just be as open and normal about it because it is normal. And I feel like that's the way to start breaking down these stigmas of what a weed mom is, And so I have been. And it's funny because all these moms that would never admit it in public are texting me about which ones to go. Everybody's doing it. That's the thing is everybody's doing it. You think a mom can't say it because she could randomly get drug tested at work when it impacts her job in no way whatsoever, or it could possibly be used against her in a custody battle. Someone told me it recently just got used against them. They pulled it from a post they did on Reddit or somewhere. They talk openly about their use and they used it against them in their life insurance policy. And so we are being forced
But couldn't they just test them after that?
Yeah.
Because if you don't pop on a test, like it's just words on a page, right?
Yeah. So she is still in the active battles of fighting the underwriting. Yeah. She is. But it's like, we're not being allowed to talk about this because they still have control over how they can impact us. And there's not a lot of people that have the ability to talk that openly about it. And that's part of the reason that I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that too. That puts me, I'm in a really good position too, where I can say whatever I want to and be fine with it. I hate that there are a lot of people that can't do that. Even the two guys that were in here just before you left, we were talking about it, but they were like, yeah, I couldn't say this, on camera. I couldn't come on your podcast and say this. And that's the world we live in, but it's not a good one because, you have people that are stifling their opinions, which, it doesn't create the most perfect world.
It allows them to get things done before people can talk about it. And when I was going to start the podcast, when I had the idea, I taken a friend with me to I don't know, you probably get the reps that come in here and show you the new lines that are coming. And I'd gotten her kind of off wine and into drinking these more. And I was like, hey, the rep wants to show us some new drinks coming in because, my husband's family owns bars. We'll just say you're the office manager, come with us. We had so much fun. But later that's when I got the brilliant idea for the podcast. I was like, man, we're just two elder millennial moms. I'm 38. I think she's 43. We got off wine. We're damn good moms. We're educated. We're this and that. I was like, let's just do a podcast about this and talk about it. Went home, made a commercial. I made a business plan. I made the whole season. I was ready to go. And she told me she had to, kind of bow out. She's like, I love it. But she's a licensed psychologist and her husband's a doctor. And so while these drinks are federally legal and it's just talking about it, she's like, I risk someone suing me. If they think I in any way told them to go near this, I risk insurance, I risk my license. And that's her and her husband's entire livelihood. Yeah. To do a fun podcast? No. So they both believe in these drinks. They both support them, but they can't openly consume them. They can't openly talk about them. And these are our psychologists, our doctors, that's scary that they believe in it and they can't say it out loud.
Yeah. I recently had a guy on here. He's a medical professional and he came on anonymous. I had to black him out and everything. And he's basically exposing a lot of the things that he dealt with on a daily basis in the hospital. But it's sad these people have to do this anonymously. And I've had so many more people reach out to me after that, wanting to come on and talk about the NOPD, wanting to talk about the fire department. They want to come on and talk about these things. They're like, there are problems here and we can fix these things, but we need to talk about them first. And we can't openly talk about them because we risk losing our jobs. I can't stand for that at all. And if I was one of the leaders of this city, I would be open to hearing their conversations. And I think it's sad that they're not.
Yes. But I mean, hell, you think this city, New Orleans, we knew how bad our mayor corrupt was. I'm not even going to go into all that, but no one wanted to run against her because the city's so nobody wanted to take on that challenge. That's how bad everyone knows it is.
You think they would just lose automatically?
No, they didn't even run against her. This last election, I think she ran unopposed.
Is it because she keeps winning?
No, it's because I think nobody wants to deal with this city.
Oh yeah, it's a mess. Yeah,
literally. So it's what do you do?
We had a pothole right out here in front of the bar. It was in the middle of the road, and it was this way for not just a week, for a month and a half. And finally, I went around to these other businesses, and I was like, "What we should do is just let's collect money, and we'll go buy some asphalt and fill this pothole because it was causing chaos out here. Cars were swerving around it. It was dangerous, and they were like, we can't do this because that's against the law. And we reported it to the city, but the city hasn't came and fixed it. And I'm like, well, yeah, we should just take matters in our own hands and fix it. And they're like, no, we can't do it because if something happens, we'll get sued. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So we sat here and watched it until finally a city bus came by and hit a car. The next day it was fixed. But I'm like, that's what it takes to actually get something done in a city. And it's insane. Insane to me.
Yeah. The city might have to be sued for anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's going to have to happen, I guess. But yeah, where can the people find you at?
Cali Sober Mom. We have So the podcast shifted a little bit.
Okay.
And I now have a partner, a co-host, and she is an ADHD neurospicy mom that also blazes her own path up in Iowa. And so her and I do it together now. And our joke is, if you have a stigma, we'll talk about it. So if there's something out there that we were saying you want to talk about, but you feel like you can't, or someone isn't yet, just send it to us. You can come on with us, or we'll just talk about it.
I love that.
And so you just put in Cali Sober Mom podcast. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We've started putting it on YouTube. The newsletter is where I can be as open as possible. So that's where I'm really trying to dig into some of the more like thicker political pieces that are happening, education, something that's more than a 20-second video, right? But also might have some words in there that I could get kicked off social media for. So the newsletter is the best place. You can subscribe on the website, which is calisobermom.com. And then we're on Instagram too.
Awesome. Well, yes, once again, I love what you're doing, and I appreciate you coming on today, and we'll definitely stay in contact in the future and maybe do this again.
Yeah, love to.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.